the editing plane is now at a higher level. And then double click to finish. And so this is how I can move my cursor sort of in the third dimension. So I just did 2 clicks in 3D. So 2 clicks, move my cursor to the Z. So once the Z turns yellow, hold Shift, move my cursor up, click, and this then moves the editing plane upwards, and then do another click somewhere along the, say, X-axis, just to be able to move our cursor in the XYZ coordinate system. So usually if you have a building or something, then this will be easier because you have points in 3D to click on. So here I don't have anything to sort of use as a reference, but when you have your model, then you'll be able to click on different points. So like of a roof or a wall, top of a wall or something. Okay, so to the side, we're now going to draw just a rectangle, but we won't use the rectangle tool. We'll just use the polyline tool still, so the polyline input method. And I'm just going to do 4 points, but my last point will be the first point. So I get a little hammer to show that it's going to close. And as soon as I click the last point and being the first point, then it will automatically fill. So now this has become just a surface with a line around the edge. So all I did was similar to a slab. So all I did was close the polygon. Yeah, so how did you go with this? So you'll notice that this shape is purely just a surface, so it has no volume. If I use the arrow tool and select just this surface, so just change the arrow tool, select this surface. Then in the info box, if I pan across a little bit, there is a panel called Solidity. So it says that this is not solid. So this is purely just a surface. So it's valid, it just means it's warning you that it's not solid. So it's not going to get any volumes from this. It's not going to show any cut surfaces. I don't see the lines in 3D. Okay, so are you drawing, so could you see the surface in 3D? Okay, when you were drawing, what happened in 3D? So it showed input, but then just disappeared. Okay, check down the bottom to make sure that you have no overrides, and the renovation status is to show all. Was there any warning when you clicked to say that it's on a hidden layer or something like this? No warning, or no, the things are not set. So just make sure no overrides, and we're showing all. So this is by default, just maybe if you'd played around with ARCHICAD before. Okay, So we'll go to the third method. So we're not going to choose the rectangle because this will choose something quite similar to this, just in a rectangular method. But we'll go to the third one.
Can you repeat the surface? How to draw a surface?
Yes. So all I did was use the polyline, so the polyline method for the morph, and I just clicked, but my last point will be the same as my first point. So I just close the polygon. And as soon as I close it, it will then fill in with the surface. Yep, how did you go? Okay, so we'll go to the third method. So we won't use the rectangle because this will choose the same thing. So we'll choose the box method. So don't have anything selected, morph and box. So in geometry method, choose the third one called box. So this will require 3 clicks. So one for the rectangle as a diagonal line, and a third one to indicate how tall this box will be. So it's better in 3D because in 2D you can't choose the third axis, so a warning will come up saying, not a warning, a dialog will indicate how tall do you want to make it. So it's easier to do this in 3D. So I'm going to do 2 clicks to make a rectangle, and a third click to say how high. So 2 clicks for a rectangle and third click to indicate the height. Okay, does everyone see black lines for your morph? So this is what we did when we first started, so maybe some got a little bit late. Okay, great. Just because the default is a little bit difficult to see in 3D, that's all. How to extrude. So I'm using the box method, 2 clicks, and a third click to indicate the height. So we're only extruding by input currently. So I'll show you how to do extruding after, so as modifications, but for now we're just doing 3 clicks for input. Can't get, I'm not sure what so all I'm doing is 3 clicks to create a box with the box method. Need close to what to extrude. Not sure what you mean, because all we're doing is the box method. So we're not extruding anything. We're just creating a box with 3 clicks. So I'll show you later how to extrude with an editing from, for example, this rectangular surface. But for now, we'll just use the box. Okay, so could everyone get a box? Okay, so the next method, it's a little bit more complex, so I'll show you first and then we can try it together. So it requires a few more clicks, so I'll show you first. So the next one is a revolved. The revolved is not really parametric, meaning you can't just modify the shape of the profile and have it revolved, sort of get it revolved again. So it becomes a kind of a permanent shape, which you can edit as just a blob after you make it. So it's not like you can, when we use the shell tool later, then we can see that this is more parametric, meaning that we can change the revolution, we can modify the profile along that revolution, etc. So let's try with the morph first. So we'll use the last method. So after box, we'll choose the revolved. And I'll show you first, and then we can try to repeat. So I'm going to draw an M shape. So I'm going to draw an M, and at my last point, I'm just going to right-click and OK. So I'm finishing the profile, the polyline, and now I need 2 clicks to indicate a axis. And as soon as after I click the first click, I see a preview. So 2 clicks to indicate axis, and then last click to indicate how far it's being revolved around that axis. So then I need to set my angle back to 0, so it'll complete it. So I'll do that again. So we're choosing the revolve method. I'm going to draw an M. Yeah, and I'm going to do a second click on the last point just to finish the polyline. Then I'm going to move my cursor away from the M to draw a line to indicate its axis. So it's revolution axis. So I need 2 clicks, and then the last click is just to say how far it's going to go around that axis. Okay, so do you want to give that a try? And let me know how you went. So I'm going to delete mine and do it once more. So I'm going to draw an M, finish the polyline with a second click or right click and OK. Then 2 clicks to indicate its axis, where it's going to rotate around. And then a revolution, so how far it goes around that axis. So it's a lot more clicks than say the box. Okay, Jessica, I think she has it. Okay, so I'll go to M, axis, and instead of trying to click to get it to 360, I'm just going to type in 360 and press enter. So maybe this is easier. So sometimes I find it maybe a little bit difficult to be able to click to get right around. So maybe entering 360 to get the full circle is a bit easier at the end. Got it, great. Okay, so after you finish the M, so once you've finished the polyline, you just need to right click and OK to finish the polyline. So it turns to a bold black. And then you need 2 clicks to indicate where the axis, so where that M is going to be revolved around. And once I do 2 clicks, I can just enter the value 360, and that will make it a full revolution. So when you finish a polyline, you can either do a second click on the last point to finish it, or I find that maybe it's a little bit tricky sometimes, that if you want to finish a polyline, just right click and OK. So maybe this is easier, but either method is fine. So the OK just is to finish the polyline, because otherwise it will just want to continue the polyline forever. Okay, so we're going to go back to the box method. So we're going to go back to the box method. So we'll keep the, so back to the box method for input. And we're going to draw a new rectangle and choose a height. So just so it's a rectangle or a box cube. And we're going to play with this one. We're going to do quite a few of these boxes. But for now, we'll do each kind of editing function on a new box. But for this one, we'll just create a new box. So we'll create a new box. We're going to use the arrow tool, or we can just hit Shift to select the box. Yeah. So once the box is selected, we're going to click on the top surface to get the pet palette editing options open. So depending on where I click, my options will be quite different. So just make sure you click on the top surface. So rather than an edge or a node, click on the top surface. And we're going to go through most of these editing options. Yep. So we've created a box. We've clicked on the top surface to get the pet palette. I haven't done anything yet. All I've done is click on the top surface. So to make sure that you've clicked on the top surface, just make sure that everyone with your arrow tool, that you have the magnet pushed in. So it's a dark magnet. So it's a pushed in magnet, because otherwise you won't be able to click on surfaces. Just in case anyone has that problem. So all I've done is click on the top surface. And from the pet palette, I'm going to choose the top row left, so the push pull. The top row left button, so the push pull. And I just move my cursor up and down, and it's pushing that extrusion up or down. So I'll just move my cursor up, click, and that will push that surface up. So I can click again, make sure push pull, bring my cursor down, and to push that surface down. So basically you're just extruding that surface. So it'll get more tricky as we get more advanced, but just the basics to start with. So we've clicked on the top surface, first icon for push pull, and we're just moving the cursor up and clicking to extrude that surface up. That. So we'll try to push it not too high, because we'll use the same box for the next method. So try to push it down a little bit so it's not too tall. And then we're going to click again on this top surface. And we're going to use the second option, which is called tube. So the tube is like a push-pull, but over a polyline that you draw. So I'll show you first, and then we can try to repeat it. So I'm using the tube on, okay, so do that again. So select the morph, click on the top surface, use the tube command. And now I will push up, and now it will want to say, where is the new direction? So I'm going to just move my cursor around, find one of the X or Y coordinates. I'm going to, as soon as it turns yellow, I'm going to hold Shift to constrain. And then I'm going to find the Z and then hold Shift. And try to find another one. So I'm just trying to find the axes and when they turn yellow. And then when I want to finish, I just go OK, right click OK to finish. So now I've extruded along a polyline. So remember when we started doing at the beginning, and we could see when we hover over the X, Y, or Z, they would turn yellow. And so as soon as they turn yellow, you can hold Shift and it will lock to that axis. So I find that's the most useful method to try to get this tube. If you have like a wall or something, then obviously you can trace with the points of the wall. For example, if you want to do some architrave type work around a doorway or something like this, or some moldings. Yeah. So do you want me to do that again? Or how did you go? Good. Got it. Ah, well done. Okay. So I find generally snapping to the X, Y, Z is the easiest, and when they turn yellow, holding Shift. So I tend to find that is one of the easier methods. As breezy. Easy breezy. Not as breezy, easy breezy. Great. Okay, so we're going to draw now another rectangle. So 3 clicks, and then we'll do the new operations on this one. So just a new rectangle. So from the box method. So once we have a new morph, we're just going to hold Shift to select it. And for this one, we're going to find somewhere, so click somewhere in the center, so roughly the center. So we'll click in the center of this top surface. And then we'll choose the third option, which is a bulge option. So we needed to click in the middle, actually defines the first click of this bulge. And then it's going to choose, so basically I need a center point, I need a radius, and then I need a deflection around that radius. So I've already got the center point, and now I've got a circle. So I'm going to put a circle a little bit bigger than my rectangle. Click, and then I'm going to just move my cursor up and down to deflect around that circle. So click, and then this is a bulge. So this can be useful for more soft furnishings, things like this. So generally this Morph tool is really good for creating custom furniture or custom kind of infills that you can't easily do with the regular ARCHICAD elements. So it's a much more free-form tool, which means that it's less parametric, meaning that, you know, for example, a wall, you can choose the height and the width. Same for the other tools, but for the Morph, it's much more free-form when you create it. Okay. So I'm going to do this again. I'm just going to create another box just to show you again. So I'm going to click somewhere in the middle of the top surface, choose the bulge from the pet palette, choose a radius, which is a bit about the same size as the top surface, and then raise my cursor up and down. So this one I can go downward. Yeah. So this is the bulge. Again, the bulge is not it's not something that I can change parametrically, so I can't just modify the radius or modify the inflection. So once it's created, it's created. I can start distorting it, but it's more yeah, freeform. So how did you go with the bulge command? I hope easy breezy as well. Good. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I hope okay is also good. Okay, so we're going to draw another box. I'm going to draw another box over here. Got it. Okay, great. So we're going to draw another box. And instead of using the pet palette, I'm going to just show you another option. So when we selected the just the plain surface, then the info box told me that it was non-solid. If I use the arrow tool to select this box, then my info box tells me that all selections are solid. So this is unlike that the line or the surface before. So this one will actually show cut fills when it's cut, and it will determine the volume when you schedule it. So let's try to start breaking this apart, because basically this box is made up of just lines and surfaces that just contain a shape. So if we select the arrow tool, so we select the arrow tool, and in the info box, we click on the arrow, and we can see there's actually two types of arrows. So we have the solid arrow and the white arrow. So if we choose the white arrow, then this means that I can select sub-elements of Morph, but it's only used for Morph, meaning if I try to click with the white arrow on anything else, it's going to give me like a little kind of warning pop-up to indicate that's not a Morph. So for now, we'll choose the white arrow, and we're just going to click a side face. So we're just going to click on a face, and we're just going to hit delete. So basically, all I did was select just this one surface and just deleted it. So this allows me to modify subcomponents of a morph. It gets more complex, so I can actually edit individual lines. But for now, we'll just click one surface, and then we'll delete it. Yeah, so arrow tool, choose the white arrow. So there's a solid arrow and a white arrow. I've clicked the surface and I've hit delete. So if I choose now the arrow tool and I select back to the solid arrow, yeah, and if I click the morph, then it selects the whole morph. Yeah, so now it says in the info box that now this is not solid because I've removed one face. Okay, so just make sure that we're back onto the solid arrow. And now there's actually a shortcut to switch between. So I find changing the arrow is not the best method. And I find that the shortcut is much easier. but I'll show you that in a bit. Because again, the main problem is that if you choose the white arrow and forget about it, then if you try to select anything else, then it won't allow you to select it. So try to always keep this on the solid arrow. Yep, so the arrow is solid. We're going to select this morph, and I'm going to just show you a quick method to how to fill this face in. So it gets a little more complex, and I can show you a second method, but I think I'll just show you the first method that you should try. So we're going to select this morph without a face. So does everyone have basically a open box, or anyone that doesn't have an open box? Got it. Okay, thanks. So we're going to select the, so with the solid arrow, we're going to select the morph, and we're going to go to the design menu, modify morph, and check solidity. So there's a lot of other options here. I won't go through all today because we'll run out of time, but we're going to use modify morph and check solidity. Yep. So with the morph selected, with that open box selected, design, modify morph, check solidity. Yep. So I'll just keep here just to make sure that you're in the same spot. And we'll check this, we'll click on this check solidity option. So I get a warning saying the current selection is non-solid, and it highlights the elements that are not solid, and it also highlights in pink just the edges that are open. So this is a simple example. So in this case, we're going to hit the solidify button. So I'm going to hit solidify, and it automatically fills in that face. This works mostly in simple cases. In more complex cases, we'll have to use another method, but in simple cases, this will usually work. Hopefully you won't have to use that too often. Just sometimes when you're modifying a morph, sometimes it can break because of the basically things start turning inside out a little bit. So it's worth checking whether a morph is solid or not solid. So if you think it looks solid, just always check to see if it actually is solid from the info box. Got it. Well done. Okay, so I'm going to just draw another morph. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, but less tall. So this one might get a little bit complex, so I'll try to show you first. So let's all try to build just another block morph, a box morph, but make it a little bit less tall than the others. So it's kind of half height. So we'll try to create this box first, and then I'll show you the editing, and then we'll try to repeat. Okay, hopefully everyone has a box. I'm going to hit Shift to select the box. Okay, so I'll show you now. What I'm going to do is click on the top surface. So like what we did before with the push, pull, tube, and bulge. And now I'm going to choose the offset all edges option. So this gets a little bit complex. So I'm going to offset all edges, and it's going to, if I move my cursor, then you can see it's offsetting all of the edges. So this is similar to the offset all edges for a slab or other polygon tools, or fill, for example. Okay, so I don't actually want to offset the edge. I actually want to offset a copy of the edge. So before I click, so I'm just dragging, I'm going to hit the Alt key. I think it's Alt on Windows, or Zach, maybe you can just confirm, even though you're on a Mac as well. So what we want to get is tap the Alt key, and we should see next to our little cursor a little plus, Control. Okay. Yeah, on Mac it's Alt. So tap the Control key, and we should see now, if we move our cursor, a rectangle, and next to the cursor shows a little plus. Yeah, thanks. So we don't want to go the copy outside. We actually want to drag the copy on the inside. So I'm going to move it inwards, and I'm going to click. So now I've split this surface kind of into two, with a kind of an inner surface and now an outer surface. So I'm going to undo that and just do it again. So I'm clicking on the top surface of the selected, use the offset all edges command from the pet palette. So the 1, 2, 3, 4th icon across on the top row. And I don't want to move it, I want to make a copy. So tap the Control key. And I'm going to drag that copy inwards. So this is one reason why I chose black, because it's a bit easier to see. So I'm going to move that copy inwards and then click. So who's the first to get it? Y, Control P. There's no P, just tap TAP, tap the Control key. Maybe it's my Aussie accent. Yeah, so we don't need to hold the control, we just need to tap to push it once. And if we push it again, then it will turn off the copy. Yeah. So if we hold it, then that's not doing anything. So we just need to tap it. I might need to find a better term than tap. Press, maybe? Got it after a few tries, okay. So we use the same control, tapping the Control key to make, if you're dragging something, then you can drag a copy. So this tapping the Control key is very useful. Okay, so who doesn't have an inner polygon? So anyone struggling still? Got it. Great. Okay, so we're going to shift click to select this morph. So hold shift just selects the arrow tool. Yeah, so we'll select this morph. And now on this inner surface, we're going to click on that surface to get up the pet palette again. And we're going to go back to the push pull. And now we're going to push pull just this inner surface. And we're going to push this inner surface down. Yeah. So this push pull is an extrusion just of the clicked surface. So I'm going to push it down. And then that now gives me a sort of an inset now. Yeah, so we just did the push-pull on the inner surface. Okay, let me know if you've got that. So trying to put the things we've learned sort of together and sort of piling them on top of each other. Done. Well done. Yes. Yes, I presume being done. So if we've got that, so if anyone's struggling, just let me know. But now we'll use create a new morph, so a new box morph. And this time we're going to make it more like a brick shape. So we're going to make it a bit longer. So imagine that you're drawing a brick. To create a new box. And what we're going to do is, so remember how depending on where I click, I will get different editing options. So I'll go through just some of those. So I'm going to hold Shift to select this morph, this new brick kind of shaped morph that I created. So I'm just selecting it, and I want to find a third. So I want to. So when we hover over an edge, we should get a little like dash, like a little tick mark in the center of it. So this is a snap point. So we got a little tick, but I don't want a center point. I want to break this into thirds. So I want to find where the third points are. Yeah. So does everyone, when they hover over an edge, they see a little tick, so a little dash kind of in the middle, or anyone that doesn't? Great. Okay, so we don't want, oh, I missed that, can you repeat? We're just hovering over an edge, Jessica, and we're seeing a little dash in the center, but I don't want the center point. I actually want to find thirds across this line. So all we've done is create a new rectangle, which is a brick type shape. So it's a bit longer than it is wide. And we're just hovering over the edge to find the center point, but we don't want a center point. So we need to modify this. So to modify where this tick is, in the toolbar at the top, we're going to find this icon here. And next to that, we're going to find a pop-up. So I'll try, I can't zoom, I think, with this recording. So we're going to find this little down arrow. So the button next to that means that it's on or off, these snap guides and points. And then to the right of that, there's a drop down. So snap guides are on and snap points are on. And currently it says half. So I want to move down and I want to choose divisions, which says 3 in brackets. Does everyone see this? So we can actually set these values, but we're just going to use the defaults for now. So instead of half, I'm going to choose divisions 3. So I'm going to choose divisions 3. And now when I hover over this edge, I will see now 2 tick marks along that edge. So now it's broken into 3 pieces. Or it gives me snap points at third intervals. Does everyone see this? Yes. Okay, great. So now we're going to hover over, so with this morph selected, we're going to hover over the long top edge, find the first third point. So when we get a tick, we're going to click on this. So when we see the tick at the third, we're going to click. And then from the pet palette, so on the top row, we're going to choose the icon that looks like a pencil. So maybe I'll show you, because maybe, and then we'll try to do this a couple of times. So I'm going to choose the pencil. That means that I can draw from this point. Now it's wanting me to draw a box because this is the geometry method that I have selected. So I don't want a box, I want a polyline from this point. And what I'm going to do is then like do a zigzag and then hover over the opposite edge, find a third, and I should see a solid pencil, and then I'm going to click. And I don't need to click OK, right click OK, because there's an intersection, it will finish. So what I did basically was split this surface into two with a polyline from one edge to the other edge. Yeah. So I'll do that once more. So hover over one edge, find a third, and get a tick point. And then from the pet palette, choose the pencil. And then this brings me to a second pet palette where I can actually draw like curves and stuff like this. Make sure the geometry method is a polyline now. I'm going to draw a zigzag. You may have to move your camera point around because it may try to snap to edges in the background. So just be careful. You're drawing only on this top surface. And then I'm going to hover over the line on the other side, find the endpoint, and then, find the third point. And then when I find this on the opposite edge, then click, which will complete this polyline. So it's a little bit more complex. We can, yes. So just make sure that when we navigate around, this polyline on top of this surface is only on the top surface. So there's no point moved up or down in the Z-axis. So it might be a little bit complex, but see how you go. Yeah, anyone having problems or anyone struggling? So we can move those points. I'll show you a little bit later because we can just click on that point and move the node. So that's possible. But for now, we'll just, as we draw it. So anyone need me to show again? Okay, sure. So undo that. So I'm going to hover over one edge, so the long edge, find a third, click. And then from the pet palette, choose the pencil because I want to draw. Make sure that you have the polyline method because I don't want to draw a box on this surface. I want to draw just a line. And then I'm going to just draw a zigzag. And then on the other side, I'm going to hover, find the third point, and then click. And that will complete the polyline, which therefore basically will split this surface into two. Anyone else having any problems? So it's getting a bit more advanced now. So now that we've split this into two, we're going to, with the morph still selected, we're going to click on the smaller side. So this smaller surface here, we're going to click here and again use the push-pull like what we did before, and I'm going to push this down. So again, using the push-pull, we'll just extrude that one surface down. Okay, finally got the line. Great. Yeah, so I just clicked on this surface, use the push-pull, and push that down, that surface. Okay, so everyone should have a box or kind of a brick with a chunk taken out of it. Got it? Thanks, Jessica. Got it, great. Okay, so now we're going to go a little bit more advanced. Hopefully I'm not going too advanced too quickly. Now we want to create a hole in the side here. So like a hole that goes all the way through. So it's similar kind of method, but instead of using a polyline, I'm actually going to use the box method because I actually want to create a box. So with this morph selected still, I'm going to choose now the box method in the geometry method, because I want to create basically a box which will then cut out from the shape. So instead of clicking on an edge, I'm just going to click on the surface. So I'm going to click on the surface, and I'm going to use the pencil again because I want to draw. So maybe I show and then I'll do it a couple of times. So on the surface, I'm clicking the pencil. So instead of an edge, choosing the box method. So I'm now with the box method, I just need 3 clicks. So I just need a diagonal to get the rectangle. And now I need to push this box to the other side. Yeah, so if I go too far, it's going to create a box outside, but I just want it the same depth as this morph. So to get it the same depth, I'm just going to choose, click on one of these endpoints. So I want to get a tick, so I'll make it the same thickness. And when I click, then it's actually going to create a hole. So basically, I've drawn a box inside a box, which therefore it will cut it out. Yeah, so now there's a hole. So I'll do that again. We can create a circle, things like this. So we could draw just with the line, we could draw a circle and then push it. So use the push pull. But for now, we're going to use just a box. So with this morph selected, click on the side surface, pencil, draw a rectangle on that surface. Then I'm going to push that, and then hover my pencil over one of the nodes on the other side. Just snap to that, click, and that will create a hole. Yeah, so it's quite similar to this method. We just have to make a box kind of the same thickness as this morph shape. So who could get that? Repeat, please. Okay. So morph selected, click on the surface, the side surface, pencil, make sure that we have the geometry method now as box. So I'm going to draw a rectangle on this surface, and I'm going to push it the same thickness as the morph itself. So that's why I'm going to hover my cursor over one of the points on the opposite side. So when the pencil turns kind of black, click. So that means that this box will be the same thickness as this morph. And so therefore it will create a hole. So there's a few steps involved. So how did anyone go with this? Done. Well done. Done. Great. Okay, so currently this morph is just all gray. So I want to sort of dress it up a little bit. How to draw a circle. Sure, okay. So I'm going to undo that. And we're going to choose, so I'll show you, you don't have to follow, but I'll just show you. So I just undid that hole. Because the box is just a box, so to draw a circle, I need the polyline. So I'll click in the center here. I'm going to choose from my input method. So I'll choose, say, a circle. Yeah, so basically I just draw a circle, and then I can use the push-pull on that circle, the same depth, and then this will make a circle. So it's the same push-pull and drawing that we did before, just kind of in a slightly different combination. So I'm not suggesting that you need to do this, but if you want to have a go, that's okay. Sure, I'll repeat. Done. Wow, well done. So instead of using box, because this will just make a rectangle, so I will draw just using a polyline tool, clicking on the surface, using the pencil, And from the pencil, I will need to choose, so I'm going to choose the last option. So I'm going to draw a circle with the last option. And it chooses, the first click is one of the points on the side, and then we'll choose the center point. And then I need to say go around 360. So basically I'm just drawing a circle, a 2D circle. And then once I've got this circle, I'm going to exit this editing drawing palette. So exit, and then use the push pull to push that surface. So similar to what we did before. So I'm going to push that surface the same depth as this morph, which will then cut it out. So similar to what we did here, instead of just pushing it down a little bit, I'm pushing it down the whole distance, and therefore it'll cut out. So that's how we can make a circle. Okay, so now we're going to start modifying the colors of this morph a little bit. And remember how we use the arrow tool to switch between the different modes. So now we're going to use the shortcut because I find the shortcut is much better. So if we hold just shift, then it selects the whole morph. But if we hit shift control, then we'll see our cursor change to white. I think it's control on Windows. So on Mac, it's control. I think Windows is either, I think it's control as well. Yep, so if I hold shift, I see the black arrow. If I hold shift control, then now I see the white arrow. Yep. And then we're going to just select one of these surfaces. So just this one surface. So using the shift control or control shift, same thing. And we're going to click one of the surfaces of this morph. So don't select anything. So if I hold shift, it selects everything. Deselect, shift control, and click on one surface. It will only select that one surface. So shift control and click on a surface of this morph. So now in my info box, it now says selected one face. Actually, it's strange that it says one faces, but my info box tells me that I just have one face selected. Can't make it. Make sure that your arrow, you have the magnet pushed. So otherwise, this won't allow you to select any surfaces. Yeah. So I find this is often a common problem where this gets unchecked for some reason. Generally, I think this is always good to have this selected, pushed, this magnet. So all we're doing is holding shift control, holding both together, and then clicking on this surface. And once we have one surface selected, we're going to go Control T to open up properties. So now this properties, the morph selection settings will show me that I have one face selected, and it will gray out all the other panels because they're not relevant to this, just this surface. So with the model tab, I'm going to push the override surfaces because I want to change the color of this. So I push the little paintbrush, and I'm going to choose something like brick. So I'm just open up the settings by Control T, override surfaces, push the little paintbrush, and then we'll just choose a different surface paint to paint this, this surface. So I'm choosing brick red, for example. And when I click OK, then just this surface will change. So let me know how you go with this. Well done. Okay, so some more editing functions. So we showed how to just draw on these surfaces and then using the push-pull. So we can modify this in another way. We can draw other morph elements, for example, and start doing Boolean operations, which can sometimes maybe be easier. So what we're going to do is again get the morph tool again, make sure we choose the box method, and make sure we don't have anything selected. And I'm going to draw another box that overlaps with this sort of shape. Just in a bit. So we're just drawing another rectangle, but make sure that we overlap so it collides with the first morph. Yep, so I'm just drawing another rectangle. Make sure it's colliding with the first one. So I'll then show you how the Boolean operations work. So again, to change the surface, hold Shift and Control. So this was just for a question. So Shift, Control, click on one surface, open up Properties with Control T, and then I override the surface and then choose a different surface material and click OK. I find this is the easiest. You can use the pet palette. So there's an option to change the surface, but I find using the selection and the settings dialog easier. Okay, so does everyone have another box drawn that collides with the first box? Yep, so everyone has two, so a box here and their original shape here that they've created. So make sure that they're colliding. So has everyone got the collided morph elements? So once we've got these two morph elements, we're going to select both. So in the info box, it should say 2 selected. How to overlap. All I did was in 3D, so use the box method, just try to draw it. So here I'm just choosing a point sort of over here. So you can draw it colliding. If you draw it outside, we can drag. So drag it in so it's overlapping. So to drag, we can just select it and then use the Control D to drag. So once we have these two selected, these two elements selected, make sure that it says up in the info box that we have 2. Just hold Shift and click on both of them with Shift held. So I'm holding Shift, click, click, and then release Shift. Just make sure that the arrow tool is also set to the solid arrow rather than the white arrow. Got it. Okay. So once we have 2 selected, we're going to use the context menu. So right click and we're going to go Boolean. And I won't go through all 3 because the union will just add them into one morph, and intersect will only show the overlapping piece, but we're going to use the subtract. So we're just going to right click, Boolean operation, subtract. So when we hit subtract, they both turn red, but as soon as I hover my cursor over one, it turns blue. So the outline turns blue. The one that I click on will be kept, meaning that the red one will be deleted. So I'm going to click on my main kind of what was originally a brick. I'm going to click on that morph and it's going to delete the other one and cut out that shape. So you could imagine that the morph that we drew could have been like a curved, it could have been sort of a different shape. And this is how we could do a Boolean operation. So it's a permanent operation. So it's not like I can kind of bring that morph back. So it's deleted it and cut out that shape. So I'm going to do that again. So selected both morph elements, right click, Boolean operation, subtract. And then I need to click on the element I want to keep. So the blue one is the one that will be kept, and the red one will be the one that's deleted and cuts out. So click on the one I want to keep, and then the other one will be deleted and cuts out that shape. How did you go? Got it, great. So with both selected in the context menu, I've chosen Boolean operation and subtract. So it's also available in the menu, but I think the context menu is probably quicker. So use subtract, click on the one I want to keep, and the other one gets removed. Great. Not solid. Just check when you select. So sometimes when you start editing, it may break depending on if it's not so accurate. So just make sure that the selections are solid. So this Boolean operation, I don't think works if they're not two solids. So if they're just surfaces, then the Boolean operation won't work. There's a couple of ways. So when you select one element and it says it's non-solid, you can try going to Design, Modify Morph, check Solidity. This will not always work in complex cases. So there's a more complex, but I probably won't go through that today because we'll run out of time. Because we can actually select all of the lines around the open block, and we can actually use the cover with faces. But this is a bit more complex, I think, for this this training. So try the check solidity for at first. If that doesn't work, then just try creating two blocks that overlap, and you try the Boolean on those two blocks. So rather than the one that is not solid, if the check solidity doesn't work. Okay, any further questions for now? Nope, okay. So what we're going to try is, okay, thanks, mate. So what we're going to now do is use the chair tool, and we're just going to use the default armchair, and we're just going to place it on the ground. Yeah. So all I've done was select the chair tool, not the chair tool, the object tool, and just place the default chair. And I'm going to choose the wall. So I know this seems a little bit odd, but I'll show you why we're doing this. And then I'm going to choose a wall. And for the wall, I'm going to change the structure from composite to basic. And I'm just going to draw a short wall behind it. Yeah. So I've just put down a chair. So the default chair. So object tool, just click to place the default chair. And I've used a wall. Just make sure that it's a basic material, so it's not a composite. And then do a short wall. So for now, we'll just have a look at this chair. So does everyone have a chair and a wall placed down, or at least a chair? Yes, okay. So just select the chair. So the one that looks like a chair, so the object tool. So I just clicked and it will place the default armchair. So by default, that's the first object that's selected. If it's a different object, it's also okay. So we're going to select that chair and we're going to right click and we're going to choose the command convert selection to morph. So for every single construction element, we can convert everything to morph. Once it's a morph, you can't convert back because then it's a different shape. So things won't go backwards, but anything can be converted to a morph for further editing. And then once it's a morph, we can actually save it as an object again if we need to. So on this chair, just right click and say convert selection to morph. And it just gives me a little warning. I'm going to hit OK. And now this is a morph element. So it's converted the GDL script into a morph geometry. So to make this seat maybe a little bit more like a little bit of an indent, like someone's been sitting in it, I'm going to click on the this surface. Actually, because it's split it into multiple morph elements, I first have to union. So maybe I can show you this, you don't have to follow along. So because these are different components, so the morph element initially wants to create 6. So I'm just have to make this 1. So I'm just going to right click and Boolean union. And so now this is one morph element now. So now it's 1. Yeah. So again, first what I did was convert selection to morph. And then I've gone Boolean and union just to make sure it's one morph. Because each of the components within the GDL will split into different morph elements. So I just wanted to make it one morph. And now I'm going to click on the inside the seat. I have to make sure that I think it may be grouped. Sorry, give me a second. Okay. Because it was multiple pieces that were grouped. Okay, you don't have to follow along. I'll just show you. So I just had to click on the seat. And so I can actually push and pull the seat now, or for example, the bulge. I'm going to create a little indentation for like a bum. So just indent a little bit. So now it kind of looks like there's a little bit of an imprint that someone sat in it. So it's a little bit subtle. But so this is the good thing about anything that you can bring in. So from any source that creates an object, we can convert it to morph and then start editing. So I'm going to try this on the wall as well. It's a little bit easier. So does everyone have a wall? So I'm just wanted to show you kind of what you can do. So does everyone have a wall? So I'm going to do the same for the wall. I'm going to right click and convert to morph and click OK. And I'm going to click on the top edge here. So I'm going to click on this edge, and from the pet palette, I'm going to choose the offset edge, so the third icon, and I'm just going to drag this down. So this will allow me to have a kind of a shape that it just has a slanted top. So we can easily create kind of the base model with any of the construction tools, convert it to Morph, and then do the fine-tune editing to get it to any shape that we want. So pretty much this morph is almost like just a box, so kind of a thin box with an extrusion, and then I've offset an edge. So I'll do that again. I'm going to undo. So on this top edge, I've just clicked on the edge, and from the pet palette, use the offset edge. And then I've just dragged. So by default, it sometimes chooses the horizontal axis. Yeah. So if it chooses, if you want to bring it down, but it's choosing a different axis, I can use the toolbar at the top to switch to a vertical plane, and then I can now move up and down. To just drag that edge. So it's similar. I think that you've already used these commands before with, say, slab and things like this. It's offset edge. So if it's moving in the wrong direction, just make sure that you choose either vertical, choose the vertical plane at the top here. Okay, so I might have, maybe it was a bit rushed for you guys. So just see how you went. Just let me know. So I find this quite handy, being able to convert anything to a morph. Okay, great. Okay, cool. Okay, so these are the, there's actually quite a bit more with the morph, but probably would need a bit more time. So I just want to cover the shell tool briefly. For example, with the morph tool, you can use this to create kind of a massing study for a building, for example. And you can then find the floor area and volume for each of the floors. If you think this is super useful, maybe we could do that in a different session, because I just want to cover the shell a little bit. So the morph, we can create some schedules and stuff like this, but maybe we can show that in a different session. So I just want to kind of show you kind of the basics of how to model and create morph elements. Okay, so we're now going to switch to the shell. Just have a little play with this tool. Yeah, so the shell tool. And we'll go through some of them. We might not go through all of the functions, but we'll just go through a couple of them for now. Okay, so we've chosen the shell tool, and in the geometry method, we choose the extrusion, and the construction method, we're going to just choose the basic. These are basically the same. It just means that the basic one has fewer clicks, and it will create kind of a predefined geometry for you, which you can edit after. The detailed just means you define the profile during input. So it's just a lot more clicks, but we'll just choose the simple input for now, and then we'll start editing the shape. So we're choosing the shell tool now, the extruded method, and the basic construction method. And we just need 3 clicks. So we need 1 click to determine the extrusion, and a 2nd click to say how wide this this half pipe is. So just 3 clicks. So 1 click to start, 2nd click to determine how what the extrusion is, and then a 3rd click to say how wide. So what is the diameter of this half pipe? So just let me know how you go with creating this half pipe or this barrel vault. Done. Great. Okay, so if we hold shift just to select this shell element, we'll see a blue line that represents its extrusion. So you can see this blue line here, and we can see another blue line that represents the profile that is extruded along this extrusion line, this reference line. So we see a profile and the extrusion vector. So just navigate around this model so we can see the end of this extrusion, so this half circle. So we just want to have a look at the end of this. So just try to move the model so we see the end of this half circle. So once we see the end of this half circle, we're going to click on that end node. And from the pet palette, we're going to choose the option that looks like a little tiny pencil, which is continue profile. So it's like 1, 2, 3, fourth option on the top row. So we just click on the end of the blue line. So not the extrusion, but the profile, so the half circle. Clicking on the end of the half circle. And from the pet palette, choosing the fourth option, which is called continue profile. And now we're going to continue this profile by drawing on this XY plane. And I'm just going to do some kind of crazy clicks and do a second click on the last point to finish that profile. So similar to what we were doing to continue the profile with any other tool, so polylines or even the morph. So basically, I'm just continuing the profile, and then it's being extruded along that vector. So at the last point, just make sure you do a second click on that last point to finish it. I think it doesn't have, so there's actually no OK in the context menu for this option, unfortunately. So we have to do a second click on that last point. If we press escape, it will cancel the whole input. Please repeat. Okay. At which point? So we've got selected this barrel vault at the end of the half circle. We're going to click on this to get the pet palette. For the top row, we're using a fourth option called continue profile. It looks like a tiny little pencil. And then with this continue profile, I just need to start drawing a polyline, continuing the polyline. I'm just drawing some sort of random lines. And to finish it, I just need to do a second click. Pet palette can't pop up. Yeah, so when you see a tick on the cursor, click. So make sure that the shell is selected. So when you see the end of the arc, sort of half circle, when you see a tick on the cursor, then click, and it should open up the pet palette. And then we use the continue profile, fourth option on the top row. And I'm just continuing the profile. And at the last point, I just do a second click to finish it. Yep, so how did you go? Half, half, okay. I find sometimes maybe finishing the profile is a little bit tricky. Okay, so we just need a few more points that is continuing that that profile. Okay, so now that I've got okay, so now we see this blue line, and because it's a profile, or because it's a polyline, we can use the same editing that we can with any other polyline. So if I click on one of the nodes, for example, I can do fillet chamfer. I can drag that node around. So I can just move that node. So same sort of editing that you can with any polyline. If I click on an edge, I can then add a point, or I can curve it, I can offset, etc. So the same kind of editing that other polylines have. So for example, one of these straight edges, I'm going to just curve. Maybe this one I'm going to curve as well. Nice. Yeah, so we can do the same sort of editing on this polyline, and it just gets extruded. And you can see that the shape that it's extruding is a composite. So I can choose any type of thickness or any composite for this extruded element. The shell is kind of similar to a roof, so you can actually put skylights into this element. But for now, we won't really need to. You can also change the cutting angle of the ends and also distort along this profile line. I won't go through all of those options today. So I'll try to go through the different, the 3 different methods of input. So any questions on this extruded method? We can also extend the extrusion, but the extrusion always has to be a straight line. So we can't have a curved extrusion, for example. So the extrusion is always just a straight vector. To make a curve, we just click on one of the edges. So one of the polyline kind of edges, and from the pet palette, we can add a point or curve. So this is similar. I can't get it. Can't get what? So to do a curve, we just the same kind of methods we use on a polyline or on a slab edge. Then we can use the curve edge. Because there's a body here and it's trying to snap to that body, you may need to move the cursor around a little bit to be able to curve it easier. Because otherwise, if you're trying to curve, then it's trying to snap to other surfaces. Trying to just move the camera around, and then I can curve. So usually you just need to modify the camera position a little bit, just so you don't have other geometry in the way. Do you see the selected blue edge? So when you hover over the blue edges, then your cursor will turn to a bold Mercedes symbol. And when that happens, then click. So I can do the curve. I can't yet because it's finding the surface. So I just need to move my camera, then I can curve. Yeah, so we can only edit this blue line, which represents the profile, which is extruded. So any questions on this one? So I'll go through then the next one. So the revolved and the ruled. The ruled is more complex, but I'll try to use just the simple method for this. So how could you go with the editing of this profile line? Because we'll need to do similar thing. Nope. Gary, nope. Nope what? Okay. Now I got it. Okay. Probably nope. No questions. Okay. Great. So we'll use a similar method for the next one. So we're going to deselect this, so nothing's selected. So make sure we have the shell, and now we're going to choose the revolved method. So under geometry method in the info box, we're going to choose revolved. And under construction method, we're going to choose the simple. Yep, so geometry method is now revolved, and the construction method is the simple. So I'll show you first. So all we need is, we need 3 clicks. So we need a center point, then a radius, and then how far we're revolving around. So if we click on the same point, then this will be automatically 360. So what I find easiest is do center point and then double click, so radius, and then click again, and this will do 360. So shell, revolved, so the second one, and the simple. So we just need center points, radius, but then do a second click on the radius. And we should get a dome. So just let me know how you go with the dome. So we just center point. So click for the center point, click for the radius, and then a second click on the radius to get the full circle. Playing with pet palette. So for the dome method, for the revolve method, we don't need to use pet palette yet, but we'll do that shortly. So if we select this dome, we see again 2 lines. We see the revolved axis. So this is similar to the extrusion axis, but this is the revolved axis. And we see the profile that's getting revolved around that axis. Yeah. So this is, we can do something similar to what we did with the morph, but in this case, it's fully parametric. So if you're doing something revolved, I tend to think the shell is better than the morph option. Yeah. So we'll select this dome, and we're going to click on the top points of this dome. Somebody has their audio on. Okay. So we're going to click on this top point of this dome. And from the pet palette, we're going to choose the move node option, which is the 3rd icon on the top row. So move node. It should default to this. And I'm going to move my cursor away, so not over, but away from that center point. So I'm going to just drag my cursor away. And now I've got a hole. So I've just moved the profile point away from the axis. Yeah, so now it looks like a lampshade. Repeat, please. Okay. So we've selected the half dome. Click on the top point, and we're using the move node command in the pet palette. And we're just dragging that away from that center point. So just dragging out to create a hole. So we're turning this into a lampshade. a very, very big lamp shape. Yep. So does everyone have a hole in the top of this dome? Can't get it? Okay, so let's go undo. So make sure that we have the dome selected. Okay, so some can. So clicking the top node, using the move node command in the pet palette, and I'm just dragging away from the center point to create a hole. So I'm just dragging that profile, the end of the profile, away from the axis. Okay. So once we've got a hole, we're going to click again on the end of this profile. So not the axis, but the end of the profile. So the same point we moved, we're going to click on this again. So instead of using the drag or the move node, we're actually going to use the continue polyline. So the exact same method that we used for the extruded method. That's the fourth across. So the continue polyline. And we're going to continue the polyline, but try to continue the polyline to not cross the axis. So imagine that center axis. So as a vertical line all the way through, try to keep to one side. Because if we cross, then it will start distorting and turning inside out. So I'm going to do a bit of a zigzag to make this into a kind of wine glass. So I'll do that again. So I clicked on the end node of that open profile, continue the polyline, and I move my cursor up, ounce up, and just do a second click on the last point to finish that polyline. So similar to what we were doing before with the extruded method. So again, this profile, we can do the same thing as we did before. So we can curve the edges, we can fill the corners, etc. So could everyone kind of get a more cup kind of shape? Yep, so we continue the profile up, ounce, and then up again, and a second click to finish the polyline. Great. Yeah, try to make sure that this profile line doesn't cross the axis. That's all. Because if it does, then it will sort of turn inside out. How again? Yep. So on the end of the profile, end of this arc, use the continue profile. So the fourth option in the pet palette. And then I'm just dragging up, across, up, and a second click on the last point. Yeah, big fat wine cup. Yep. We need this, especially if we're all at home. we need a big one. Kind of makes you wonder why you need a big cup when you just got the bottle. Anyway. Yeah, thoughts. Okay, so we can do the same editing. We won't go through all those again, but we can edit this shape and curve these edges and continue again. But what I'll do is go into the, so with this profile, with this shell selected, I'm going to open up the properties. So Control T to open up the shell settings. And I didn't go through the ones for the extruded, but it has a few settings specific for the extruded. So we can set the end angles and the distortion of the profile, but I didn't go through those just because I'm just conscious of time. But let's try for this revolved one. So I've selected the morph and open up this shell selection settings and open up the revolution properties panel. So here we can see revolution angle, so it's 360, so we can actually modify how far this goes around. So let's try 180. So I'm just going to modify the revolution angle to 180, and I'm going to hit OK, and now this is only a half revolution. So you can see that this is a parametric. For example, maybe if this is against a wall or something like this. So open up the properties, Control T on the selected revolved shell and revolution properties. So I've just changed to 180, and now I'm just going to change this back to 360. So it's a full circle. You can't choose anything above 360, just of a note. So 360, back again, and now this is a full revolved. Okay, so that's the revolution, so we can change that on the fly. And let's have a look at the settings again. So we'll open up the settings dialog again. Yeah, so this revolution properties, and we have this option, segment surface along rotation. So we're going to check that. So we're going to check the segment surface along rotation. And by circle, we're going to choose, instead of 36, we're just going to choose 5. Yeah. So open up the properties, Control T to get the shell selection settings. It's too many S's. Revolution properties, and we played around with the revolution angle at first, but now we'll check the segment surface along rotation and by circle, and we'll choose a low number like 5. And we hit OK, and now you can see that it's segmented into 5 pieces. So you can imagine if you're creating like a kind of an onion dome, then you could actually use this kind of technique to be able to segment it into equal facets or segments. Yeah, so you can actually create some interesting roof shapes, I think. Or if you need sort of certain shapes for like a post or something like this, it's also possible. Okay, so I'm going to open up the properties and just uncheck that again, so we have the full circle. So we have a smooth circle. So I'm just unchecking this and clicking OK. Yeah, and now we're back to a smooth revolution. Okay, so let's now go with the last option. So this gets a little bit more tricky. So with the shell tool, nothing selected. Let's choose the ruled, and I'll go through just the basic again. The detailed requires a lot more clicks, and I think maybe this is a bit too much for now. So we'll just stick with the simple. Yeah. So geometry method is ruled. So the third one, and we're choosing the basic. So we'll need 4 clicks for this type. So I'm going to go 1 click, and I'm going to just snap to the Y axis. So I'm going to make the half dome. I'm going to move my cursor along the X. So move my cursor away, and then 2 clicks along the Y axis. So we just need 4 clicks. So the first 2 clicks defines the first profile, and then the second 2 clicks defines the second profile. So I'll do that again. So 2 clicks, try to get it in one axis, so say the Y axis. So 2 clicks to define that first, and then I move my cursor away, and then find the other 2, try to get that on the Y axis. Yeah, so, and then the lines for the second profile. They don't have to be parallel. So the 2 profiles. So what it will do is from the 2 profiles, it will basically join in a linear fashion. So similar to sort of 3D. So it's not quite lofting. Maybe you've heard this from 3D programs where you can kind of blend between different shapes. So it's a little bit similar, but this is more linear connection between two profiles. Okay, so let me know if you can get some shape like this, where the two profiles are more or less parallel. Or if you need me to show, got it, great. So again, with this is more complex because we have two profiles, and each profile we can actually continue just like how we did for the extruded method or the revolved method. So each profile I can edit and control. I tend to recommend to try to get the same number of points on both profiles. So if we have, say, 3 or 4 points on one profile, try to get 3 or 4 points, so the same number on both profiles, because then the connection between the two will be simpler, because it will basically connect the dots between the two profiles. Yeah. Okay, so if we can select this shell. So we select the shell, and on this curved edge, I'm going to click on the curved edge, and I'm actually going to flatten this. So I'm going to go to flatten it. You actually have to click the insert new node. So I've just clicked on the curved edge, so on the curved profile, and choose the insert new node, and this will automatically flatten it. Yeah, so this curved edge, make sure you get the bold Mercedes, click on it, and then from the pet palette, choose the first option on the top row, so the insert new node, and this will flatten this curve. So basically, we just got two lines that are connected. So let me know if you've got two flat profiles. Okay, done. Got it. Great. Okay, so the one corner, we're going to click on one of these corners, and we're going to use the move node, and we're going to move that node up. So try to snap to the Y, and in my case, it's the Y axis. So I'm just moving that node up to click. So I'm just bringing 1 point up. So I just clicked on the node and used the move node, so the first option on the top row, and just move that vertically up. Yeah. So we have 1 point that's up. And we're going to do the same, but on the diagonal corner. So the corner diagonally opposite, we're going to click this node, and we're going to do the same. We're going to drag that point up on the Y axis and click. So we'll just move 2 points on opposite corners up. And so now it looks like a parabolic roof. So it's a parabolic curve. So kind of like a maybe a sunshade, kind of similar type of tent structure. So let me show you how to do this. So all I did was move the two diagonal points up. So click on the node, move node, and then just drag up. So we just need to do that on the two diagonal corners. So we'll leave the other two diagonal corners on the ground where they were before. Okay, just let me know if you've got a parabolic curve. Got it, great. Okay, so if I go to the floor plan, so I'm going to switch now to the floor plan view, and I'm just going to move around until I can find that shape. So here I can see it here in my floor plan. So you can see that the floor plan shows it how it's cut at the floor plan cut plane. So at like the 1.1 meters, this is how it's cut. So if I move up a level, for example, then I can see then, okay, this is not so tall, but each story will show me exactly how it's cut and projected onto the floor plan. Yep, so everyone's got onto the floor plan and can see that shell that they just edited and created, and it should look something like this, where they can sort of see it and cut on the floor plan. So try to find it on the floor plan. And we're just going to modify the projection settings because I just want to see kind of the whole outline and not necessarily these cuts. So it will make the next few steps a little bit easier. Okay, so everyone can find there, just let me know that you can find that shell that we just created. So it should look something like this, like mine. Don't have the column on the right. It may be the opposite way, but it should look something like this. So it may be inversed, but it should look like this. And I saw a solid shell. Maybe just because, so my points that I raised up are quite high. So I've moved them up. So I'm just snapping to the Y. So I've moved mine up, for example, like 4.5 meters from ground level. Yeah, so I can see in my tracker that mine is about 4.2, 4.3 meters from ground. So if it's quite low, then it won't look as extreme as this. Okay, but everyone can find the shell. I think yes, great. Lost just now. All we're doing is trying to find the shell on the floor plan. We can select it just in 3D, but I wanted to show kind of on floor plan. So if you can't find it on floor plan, then we can just select in 3D. And then we'll modify the settings. So it's a little bit more obvious on floor plan. Okay, so we're going to select it on floor plan or in 3D if you can't find it on floor plan. And we're going to open up the settings. So Control T. And we're just going to modify some of these settings. So make sure that the home story, so under the geometry and positioning, is set home story is to ground floor, so 0 ground floor current. So make sure that that's set. So make sure that the ground floor is also you're on the ground floor. So on the project map, it says ground floor, which is in bold. Yep, so that's the first thing. So we're just checking the home story is ground floor. Then we're going to go to the floor plan and section, and we're going to modify some of these settings. So we're going to modify the show on stories. We're going to change this to home story only because I just want to see it on this floor. And we're going to change the floor plan display to outlines only. So we've made sure that home story is ground floor. Show on stories is home story only, so it'll only show on this ground floor. And the display is going to be outlines only because I don't want to see it as projected. I just want to see a full outline. So we've got to check these three things first. Yep. So home story, ground floor. Floor plan section, the show on stories is home story only. And the floor plan display is outlines only. Yep. So let me know once you've set those three settings. Set, great. Okay, so now we've set those three things. We want to see a little bit more colorful on the ground floor. So instead of just being white. And in this floor plan section, we're going to scroll down until we see cover fills. So we see it checked, which is good. But we want to change the cover fill instead of background. We're going to set this to 25%. Just so it's a little bit more obvious on the floor plan, so not white. So we're changing the cover fill to 25%, and I'm going to choose a background pen that is transparent, which is the circle with the line through it, which is pen 0. So you can just type 0 for the background pen. Yeah. That means if we put anything behind it, we can actually see it. Because otherwise, if it was white, it means that it will hide anything we draw behind it. So the cover fill is now set to 25%. Background pen is transparent, pen 0. And I'm going to change my foreground pen, so just the cover fill pen. I'm going to choose maybe a little bit different color to be a bit different. You can choose whichever color you would like. So maybe I'm going to choose blue. So this will be how it appears on the floor plan. Yeah, so cover fill 25%. Background pen should be transparent, 0. So once we've got all that set, we then go OK. And so now I just see a blue kind of rectangle now on the floor plan. So hopefully everyone can see that, maybe a different color, but everyone should see a sort of a rectangle, more or less a rectangle on the floor plan. So just let me know. Okay, so we're meant to finish that now, but hopefully everyone can stick around for another sort of 15, 20 minutes, if that's all right. Background is gray off. Yeah, so so the background, so the cover fill 25%, background pen is transparent, pen 0. Can't make the selection. You can also do this just from the 3D window. How come color and 3D never change? So this is the cover fill is only affecting the floor plan appearance. So if we want to check the 3D, we would need to either change a different building material or composite, or override the surface on the outside. So this is only affecting the 2D appearance. It's deleted. It probably went to a different story. So this is why we needed to make sure that we're on the ground floor, and that we needed to be in home story to set as ground floor as well. Because otherwise may move to a different story because of when we set home story only. So if you can't see it anymore, make sure that you're on the ground floor. If you still can't see it, find it in 3D and then just check these settings again. So if basically the home story is different to this home story, the story I'm looking at, I won't be able to see this anymore. But this is what we wanted to do. Okay, so anyone struggling to see this on the ground floor now after modifying all this? Can't get my cover fill to be 25%. Yeah, so cover fill. So in my solid fills, I have 25, 50, 75%. So these are kind of out of the box. So, I mean, like these are the defaults based on the default template. If you don't have 25% listed here, we probably have to update your attributes to have them available, but out of the box these are there. If you don't see it, then just choose a foreground for now, which will just be a solid. Yeah, so that was quite a lot of settings that we're setting. So anyone having a problem? So everyone should see their sort of solid shell on the floor plan. Because we'll need to see it for the next couple of things that I want to show. Okay, so I think okay. Okay, so now we're going to deselect the shell on the floor plan, and we're going to go under More in the toolbox. So under the More, we're going to go down to the Spline tool, or the SP line, the spline. Yeah, so under More, we're going to go down to the Spline tool. Where to find at the top. My icon to the left missing. The toolbox is missing. Yes, okay. So if the toolbox is missing, probably you've accidentally dragged it off or closed it. So under Window, Palettes, Toolbox. So this should be on. Okay, great. So we're going to the More and choosing the Spline tool. Oops. So choosing the Spline tool, and we're going to choose create a spline from like about 4 points or something, like kind of create an egg shape, but it has to be contained inside this this box, this shell box that we see here. So I'm just going to create like 3 or 4 points, maybe 5 points or something. Create like an egg shape, so something like this, and then I'm going to create a smaller one on the inside. So it's another kind of egg shape. So try to get the outer one kind of close to the edge, but it shouldn't go over the edge. So we're just choosing the spline under More. So if you can't find the spline, then, okay, so for one person that's not available, go to Document Tools, and choose Spline. Yeah. So maybe your setting, you had a different work environment or something. But by default, it's always under More. So again, if you can't find it, go to Document Tools, and Spline. And all I've done is create 2 egg shapes. So when you create, just make sure that you finish at the first point. So you see the little hammer, and that will complete it. So it's all a closed shape. Yep. So we need to create 2 splines that are closed. Yep. And try to get maybe 4 or 5 points along there. So once you've created 2 splines, they're kind of egg type shape, just let me know. Created, great. Yeah, so 2 shapes, kind of like what I've drawn here. So one bigger one that's very close to the edge, and an inner one which is much smaller. So got it? Anyone that doesn't have 2 splines drawn, and they must be closed. That's all. So the last point and the first point should be the same. Yeah. Anyone doesn't have it yet? No, spline can only be drawn in 2D. So spline is only an annotation kind of element, a 2D element. Yeah. I see, no wonder. Ah, maybe you're in 3D. Okay. Okay, so hopefully everyone's kind of looks like this. So now what we're going to do is use these shapes to define the contour and a hole for this shell. So we can do these contour and holes for any of the shell types. I'm just going to do it on this ruled shell. So what I'm going to do is use the arrow tool, select this shell. So I'm going to select the shell that's underneath these 2 splines. Yep, so select the shell, and it has 2 unique functions just for the shell. And if I right click, so it's shell selected, I right click, and I've got 2 functions: define shell contour from the context menu and create hole in shell. So first we want to use the define shell contour from the context menu. So I'll show you first and then we can try it. So I go define shell contour. I'm going to hold spacebar, which is magic wand. So I'm holding spacebar and I'm clicking on the outer polyline, outer spline. And so now you can see that it's used that shape to define the contour for this for the shell. So I'll do that again. So select the shell, right click, define shell contour, hold spacebar, and then click on the outer spline. Okay, so let me know how you go with this. Can't do it. Okay. So also check. So check to make sure that the spline is complete. So it has to be a full spline. You can check the settings. So in the settings, so if you open up the settings, so Control C, you just need to make sure that it's a closed spline. Yeah, yes, thanks, Asher. Yeah. So just make sure that for those that it didn't work, we don't need to select, we just need to hold spacebar. So use define shell contour, I'm holding spacebar, nothing else. And then I just click on the outer spline. So using the same technique, we're going to do the exact same thing. So there can only be one contour for a shell. So we're going to select the shell again, right click, and now the define contour is not there because we've already defined it. And we're going to use the create hole. So I'm going to use the create hole, do the same thing, hold spacebar, and then click on the inner spline. I have a trackpad, so we don't need to hold, we just need to select and then hold spacebar. So I'll do that again. So select the shell, right click, create hole. I'm not touching anything on the keyboard, holding spacebar, and then move my cursor over the spline, inner spline, and then click on it while holding the spacebar. Couldn't select the shell. So this is why we needed to change those settings at the beginning to say that we only see the shell on the home story, so therefore that we can actually see it. Because if you had it previously, then sometimes this is harder to select the shell. So Jessica, could you get the contour? Or you couldn't get either. So your shell was looking like a solid. I have the contour, okay. So make sure that your arrow has the magnet pushed in. And then I can select on this kind of blue area and then use the context menu to create hole. So can you click inside this contour area? So if you click, do you see the little magnets with your cursor, Jessica? I can't get the contour now. It just hangs when I press spacebar. Okay, so maybe you'll just need to modify your spline on the inner spline to make it a little bit simpler, because maybe it's too complex for the algorithm to trace. So you may need to change the spline to be a little bit simpler on the inside. Yep, it only has 6 points, but if it's overly complex, the shape, so you can see that when it creates it, because the algorithm behind a spline is using a kind of Bezier points, but when it converts it to a hole, it will use arcs. So therefore, a lot more points will be created because it has to create arcs between those points, which is very different to how a spline works, which is more Bezier based. So who could get a hole? Just let me know. So who could get both the contour and the hole done? Okay, some. Can't get the hole. Okay, but you could get the contour. Okay. So we just needed to make sure, but when you select the shell, you can right click and you have the create hole in shell is available. And when you try to hold spacebar and click on the inner spline, did it make like a beep noise, or so at what point, at what sort of what happened? So what did the computer say to you or do to do? Okay, so as long as you've got a contour, so I can just show if, because we would need to probably see how yours looks. Maybe settings are a bit different. I selected the, don't need to select it. So we just need to select the shell. So I'm going to undo my, yep. So I just selected the shell. The spline is purely just there to trace over. So the spline is just a regular 2D annotation. The spline is purely just there to trace with the magic wand. So I'm just selecting just the shell, right click, create hole, and then I'm holding spacebar and then clicking on this spline. So basically the magic wand will just trace that spline. So the spline is actually not linked to it. It's just there to generate the shape of the hole. Okay, so if I now select the shell, and press F5, so now I can see just this element in 3D, and now you can see it looks like a Pringle with a hole in it. Yeah. So who see Pringles? So maybe, I don't know, I think it looks like a Pringle. But yeah, so you can see that this is kind of what could be used for, say, like a stadium or a shelter or kind of a smaller kind of pavilion building even. Okay, so the shapes that create the hole and the contours are actually sub-elements now of this, or are ribeye steak. Maybe a bit of a floppy ribeye steak. Yeah, with the with the bone in the center of it. Spline can create a hole. So for wall, no, because we don't have that, but you can use that to generate any shape on the slab as well. Okay, great. So can the spline create a hole for wall and slab? Not for a wall, because you can only create holes in walls with the opening tool or the doors and windows. But in slab, yes, you can create any shape of hole in a slab. And you can use a spline to then magic wand to kind of create that shape. So this hole and contour are actually sub elements. So if I click on the edge, I can actually see the contour, which is kind of separate to the shell itself. So for example, if I select just the outer, I can select those nodes and kind of drag them. So, and to edit this boundary. So it is a sub element, or if I select it and actually hit delete, then it actually removes that contour. So it's a fully, so the original shape is there, it's just two other shapes kind of interacting with this shell, and even for the hole. So I can select just this inner hole, and I can see the shape and polyline kind of operator that's being used to create the hole. So this hole, I can actually like drag a copy, I can rotate it, I can move the points, etc. So we're going to try to one last thing. If we have about 10 more minutes, if people don't have time, we can finish it here, or I can spend another 10 minutes just showing you one more thing. So because this Pringle or this ribeye is floating, we probably want to create some columns to kind of hold this up. So just let me know if you have maybe another 10, 15 minutes. Otherwise, we can kind of wrap it up. And maybe we can show that some other time. You have? Maybe people are getting a bit hungry or need need toilet breaks. Okay, so we'll try to create some columns just to hold this Pringle and ribeye up. Yeah. So maybe it's like toothpicks holding the ribeye stick. So we're going to go back to the floor plan, and we're going to get my column tool. Yep, so back to the floor plan, so we can see our stake, and get the column tool. And I'm just going to go close to the border, and I'm just going to click to place it. So this is why it was better to use a semi-transparent fill, because then we could see this column. Otherwise, it will be behind the solid shell. Yeah, so I just clicked a column to place a column close to the border. So actually, I might move it a little bit off, and I can see my column is far too big in relation to this, so I just need to make a smaller column. So I'm just going to make my column a little bit smaller, clicking on the edge. This is only a 23 feature, so I'm just going to make my column a bit narrower. I mean, this graphical editing is only a 23 feature. In the info box, you should see a size. It was a bit different in 22, so I just need to make my column a little bit smaller. So maybe just a 200, 120. So it's a little bit more proportional to my shell. Yeah, so I'm just modifying the size of the column to be a little bit more proportional, and maybe it's longer than it is wider. So from the info box, there should be a size that I can set the width and the height of this. Or can use a circle column, it's also okay. Using a circle column would actually be easier, because what I'm going to do is rotate this so it's perpendicular to this boundary. But with the circular column, that won't matter. Yeah, so you can either use a circular column or a rectangular and just make the size a little bit smaller. Yeah, so I can see my column is still just vertical, so I need to rotate it so it's perpendicular to this edge of my shell. So I'm going to use the command Control E. So this will bring up a compass to basically I need to rotate this so it's perpendicular. So using Control E, clicking on the center point of the column, and I need to know where the rotation is from. So I'm going to click on the Y axis. So Y axis, and I'm going to drag my cursor around and then hover my cursor over the edge of the shell until my cursor changes from a pencil, and it should turn into a right angle. So at some point it will turn to a right angle. So it looks like a little eye. Yeah. So once it turns to perpendicular symbol, I click, and that will make this perpendicular to that edge. Why can't I make rectangular column? Are you using ARCHICAD 22 or 23? Because the interfaces are quite different. Okay. So the column under the structure, just make sure that you have the rectangular option selected from the structure in the info box. So just make sure you choose rectangular, and then you just need to scroll across in your info box to cross-section size. Make sure that the link is off, so it's not making it exactly a square. And I chose, for example, 200 by 120 for my size. it's a little bit thinner. So what we're going to do is now with this column, we're going to copy it around this shell. So does everyone have a column roughly in place? And try to make it kind of perpendicular. Yes. Yeah. If it's a circular one, then it won't matter. How to make the column appear, it is underneath. Yeah, this is why we needed to use a 25% fill and a transparent background. So if you can find the column and select it, we can just right click and say display order, bring to front. So this will make it in front of the shell. If you can't even select it, you can't see it, then select the shell and use the display order send to back. Yeah, so if you can't see it because your transparent background isn't transparent, then we can just send it to back. Okay, so selecting the column to rotate again. So we're using Control E, yeah, using the center point. And if it's vertical, then we use the Y axis. And then, so click for the Y axis, and then I'm moving my cursor to rotate it. And then I'm hovering my cursor over the edge of my shell, and it will show me a pencil with a line in the center of it. But at some point, I will see my cursor change to a little kind of perpendicular symbol. So once it turns to that symbol, it means it's a right angle, and then I can click. So generally, you'll see by eye roughly where the perpendicular will be, and your cursor will change to indicate perpendicular. So if you can't get it, it's okay. We can do it kind of by eye. Control E for rotate. I don't know why E and rotate, but it's also available under the kind of context menu move and rotate. So you can see E is the rotate. So I find that because this is quite a common one, I find the shortcut is easier. Just like the D for drag, E for rotate. Yeah. Okay, so everyone's got a column in place. So now we're going to do the next part. We're going to copy this, so multiply this around. Okay, so we're going to select the column. So even if it's not perfectly perpendicular, as long as it kind of looks more or less right. So we're going to select the column. Yep, so just the column that we want selected. And on the keyboard, we're going to use Control U. We can also use the context menu under the Move submenu. So the U opens up the multiply dialog. So we have the column selected, and we've hit Control U for multiply. Control plus U equals multiply. Again, I don't know why U. I guess there's a U in the word multiply. I think because M we've used for mirror. So that's why we use U for multiply. Yeah. So let me know if you've got open the multiply dialog with the column selected. Great. Okay, so we're going to need to set up some settings in here. So we're going to use the drag. So make sure that drag is selected. For the graphical input method, we're going to set to distribute because we want an equal number around. But we don't want to copy at the end because we've already got a copy because we want to go all the way around and sort of end where we started. So with the distribute, we want to check -1 so we don't get a copy at the end. Yeah, so drag distribute -1. The number of copies, maybe set this to around 20. Vertical displacement is 0. And we want to make sure that we have the pick path before input. So this is checked. And the rotation of the copies, we want rotate to path. So we have none, meaning that all the columns will be facing the exact same way as this original one. And randomize, meaning that this will just randomly rotate as we move around. So the randomize is actually really good for things like trees and plants if we're copying those around. So it kind of makes them look more scattered rather than being too uniform. So this is why we have a randomize, but we want pick path and rotate to path. So let me know once you've got the drag, distribute -1, about 20 copies, vertical displacement 0, and we've picked the path and rotate to path are checked. So once we have that, okay. So once we have that set up in the multiply, we're going to hit OK. And then I'm going to hover over the edge of the shell and it will turn black. So it will turn bold black. So once it turns bold black, I'm going to click on it, which then gives me the path. And then I'm going to drag that path to the center point of my column. So I'm going to click on the center point of my column. And now I'm going to move my cursor around that path to copy the 20 copies. And I'm going to click back on the center point. So if I go too far, it's going to start again. Yep. So I'm just dragging around this path, and then maybe it's easier to zoom in a bit, and I'm going to click on my starting point. And so now I've got 20 copies rotated around that path. So I'm going to do that again. Yep. So I've got the column, Control U. So I've set this up as we discussed before. Okay. So now hover over the edge of the shell. I'm going to click on it to pick that path up. I'm going to move that path or offset that path and use the center point of the column as my kind of point of copy, and drag my cursor around, follow that path, and then sort of zoom in and then click back on the center point of the column. Again, if I go too far, it will start again. So then I click, and now it's copied around. So this is not associative. So if I modify the path, so it's just a one-time kind of input, but it can follow any path, which I think is pretty cool. Okay. So let me know how you go with copying around that path. Oh, well done. Okay, so I'm going to deselect those, and I can either select all of this, or I'm just going to use the marquee tool. So use the bold marquee, and I'm just going to draw a box around this shell, just so when I press F5, I only see what's inside this marquee. Yeah, so I just use the marquee tool, and I've used the all stories, so the bold one, and just draw a box around it, and then hit F5. So now in 3D, I should see all the toothpicks, some going through. Multiply, it's above in the chat. So Control U. Okay, so can everyone see now the columns and the shell in 3D? Yes, great. Okay, so using the marquee just allows me to only see this, so I'm not seeing all of the morph elements and other things around it. So that's why I just put a marquee around this, just to focus just on these elements. So what we need, I can see my columns are not tall enough in some places. So maybe yours all go through, but for me, some of them don't quite go through. So I need to make them a bit taller. Can change the number of column after done. You would have to undo and then redo. So it's not a live connection. It's kind of like a one-time input. So if you need more, you can just undo and then redo the command and choose a higher number of copies. My shelf above the column. I presume you mean shell. Yeah, so for my columns, most are pointing through, but if they're not, let's stretch them taller. So they all should poke through, and then we'll go and use the trim command. Okay, so in 3D, I'm going to choose the column tool, and I'm going to use on the keyboard Control-A to select all columns. So because the column tool is active, it will select all the active tool, which is column. Yeah. So I just choose the column tool and go Control-A to select all. And I'm going to choose the center point of this column, so the top of the reference line. So I'm going to click on that. So when I see the tick, and from the pet palette, I'm going to choose the stretch height. First option. And I'm just going to drag my cursor up, and then all of them will now follow that height change. So I clicked on the top of the column, use the stretch command, so stretch height, and move my cursor up, and then all of them will change. So you just need to stretch them tall enough that you see the tops of all of them through the shell. So from the click on the top of the reference line of one of the columns, from the pet palette, choose the stretch height, so the first on the top row, and then just move your cursor up and then click, and then all of them will follow that height. Okay, so everyone can see the columns above their shell, so all the columns are poking through. Yes, great. Okay, so now that they're all poking through, we're going to hold Shift and now select the shell. So we're adding the shell to the same group of selection. So we had all the columns selected, and now we've just hold Shift to click on the shell to add that to the selection. So basically all the elements in the current window are selected. And we're going to right click, go down to connect, and we're going to use the trim elements to the roof shell command from the context menu. Yep, so connect trim elements to roof shell. And I get a dialog saying, do you want to use the roof or shell in the current selection, or do I want to select a different one? So I want to use the one in the selection, the default option, and I go trim. So now all the tops get trimmed off. So I can see the tops of them, but we can clean that up later. So all we did was stretch the height of all the columns. So the actual height of the column is still this tall. We've just made a trimming connection between the shell and the columns. So therefore there's an interaction between them. So it's a live connection. So it means if I modify the shell shape, then this will follow as well. So I'll do that again. So select all my columns, add the shell, select all columns, add the shell, right click, connect, trim elements to roof shell. And then use the roof shell in the selection, yep. And then hit trim. And then all the tops get trimmed off. Okay, so now I can see the columns are poking through. This is because the building material strength, so the strength of the column is actually stronger than the strength of the shell. So we can just change the material of the shell, so it's a stronger material. So I'm going to select the shell, and under my info box, under structure, I'm going to change this from composite to basic. And when I do that, it automatically uses the reinforced concrete, which I can see is now stronger than the column strength. So now it trims. And because it's a basic, I can now edit the thickness here. So maybe 300, I'll change down to 200 to make it thinner. So maybe it's more like a pancake. Okay, so how did you go with this? Any questions? Great. Okay, so this is the two things I wanted to show you. There's a little bit more, but we kind of don't really have time to go through even more detail. I think on Friday, I'm going to go through the curtain wall with you. But any questions from the Morph tool or shell tool? I think once you start playing with it a little bit more, you'll probably have a few more questions. Could you repeat the last segment again? Making the roof thicker. So I selected the shell. I changed the structure from a composite to basic. Jessica couldn't make a hole. We can try to go through that, but maybe see kind of how your roof kind of looks. Okay, so I changed the material structure from composite to basic, which made it reinforced concrete. And then in the info box, I went to the thickness panel and just made it a bit thinner. So it was 300, but I just made it a bit smaller to 200. How to remove the column? Yeah, so because the building material, so the building material strength of the column was stronger than the composite. So that's why I just used a different material for the shell to be a stronger material than the columns. So now the columns are cut out by the shell. So this is based on building material strength. The outlines all in red. Can I change the color? The outlines in red, yes. So of the columns, Casey, so the columns or the shell. So yes, the contour color you can change to a different color. So for example, if I go to column tool, select all, open up properties, the 23 dialog looks much different. So I go to the floor planner section, and under outlines, there's the uncut line pen. Currently, this is set to red. So I can set this to black and hit OK. And now the lines are all black. So similar actually to what we did for the Morph. So we changed the Morph pen to black as well. So either you could do it in the default, or we could actually make a graphic override combination that will automatically turn everything to a certain color based on certain rules. But I think this is a more in-depth training or webinar. Yep. So any other questions? Yep. So I select column or columns. Control T. So Control T always opens up the settings of the tool, active tool. So Control T opens up the settings dialog for the tool. And I just went to floor plan section, down to outlines, and just changed the uncut line pen. So this is the pen that I see in 3D. So I just changed it to black. Okay. So do you think that you guys will use, I think the morph is really good for sort of custom shapes. The shell, maybe it's a little bit more specific. So this is for more kind of crazy, not crazy, but more kind of free form kind of roof shapes. How to remove the column mark on shell. Yep, so use the shell, select all, Control T, floor plan and section. So here I see the little dashes. So this, we can turn this off. So if I just scroll down, floor plan symbol, it's currently set to crosshair. I can set this to being an X, a slash, or just off. So I can change that symbol on the floor plan to just plain. Yep, so that gets rid of those little lines. Maybe that's not how to remove column mark on shell. I'm not sure what you mean. So you could see the columns poking through, but this was because of the building material. So we just had to make sure that the shell was a stronger material. So if not any other questions, I will wrap it up. We went, sorry, a little bit over, like an hour over. I'll try to keep the next one more focused, just because the morph and the shell probably has a lot. So maybe this could have even been 2 sessions. Okay, so I think one of the either Ashraf or Zaid, I think, is doing tomorrow, and I'll be working. You'll hear from me again on Friday, and I'll talk about the curtain wall. So thanks. Have a good, enjoy the rest of your day, and let us know if there's anything else. Thanks, guys. Have a good day. Bye.